Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing another video. The subject of today's video is going to be on sort of a new, different kind of random topic that I picked, but it's basically trying to rank and do a bracket of some of the best NBA teams of all time. I thought it might be fun, thought it might be a little bit different, so that's what we're going with today, and let's get into it. So basically, I picked 16 teams to put into this bracket, and then I'm going to go through and pick who I think should win, basically based on who I have facing who, and in hypothetical playoff series, who I think would win versus which team. So the way I determined this was I tried to get a good mix of teams from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. So I didn't just do like all teams from 2000 till present or teams only in the 80s and 90s. I went across all the generations. I didn't do the 50s. I didn't do the George Mikan Lakers from the 50s because I feel like that's just actually too far back and not really relevant to, say, somebody playing in 2010, that you could really compare the style of basketball whatsoever. But I think like 60s to present is uh, close enough to relate essentially. So how I did this was I picked out some of the teams that stood out to me over the years, and basically I'll just go through the rankings right now. How I did it was 14 of the teams are NBA champions, and then I picked two teams that didn't win an NBA championship but had really fantastic seasons, and people assumed that they were going to win the title. And so I'll go through and explain why I picked each team maybe, and then how many wins they won, and what ultimately happened at the end of their season. So the number one seed in this bracket, and I also seeded based on wins in the regular season, just how they would do it in the regular NBA. So if you initially think like, well, why is this team ranked so low when they were so good or something like that? It's just based on the regular season win total, and then we'll see what happens in the bracket and how I think teams would beat certain teams, stuff like that. So the number one seed is the 96 Bulls, who obviously very, very good team. Could be the best team of all time. They won 72 games. They won the championship with relative ease. You got the core of Pippen, Jordan, um, Rodman, Tony Kukoc, Ron Harper. So just that team at its prime, probably the best singular season that a team could have, honestly. Next, I have the 1972 Lakers, who had a core of Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Gail Goodrich, and Happy Hairston. And Elgin Baylor retired in the middle of the season, so they didn't have him anymore. But those main three between Wilt, Jerry West, and Gail Goodrich were the heart of the team. Gail Goodrich actually had a really good season. He averaged 26 points a game, really nicely filling that scoring void that Elgin Baylor had been leaving. So they won 69 games in the regular season, and they are the 2 seed. As for the 3 seed, I have the 1985 to 86 Celtics. They won 67 games in the regular season. They had the core of Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Danny Ainge, Dennis Johnson. Bill Walton was the sixth man of the year that season. So that this is the best season that they had as a team during those 80s teams by far, and some people have called this the best team in history as well. Next, we have the 1999 to 2000 Lakers, who won the championship and won 67 games during the regular season. I really struggled of which iteration of these Lakers to pick, the 2000 team, the 2001 team, or the 2002 team. So I figured they all won championships, so I figured I'd just go with the one that was far and away like the best team throughout the entirety of the season. So as I said, they won 67 games, and although the 2001 team did like swept through almost all of the playoffs, they only had like I think 56 wins in the regular season. So I thought 67 was a bit more impressive. Also, just when I was comparing them, I thought that the 2000 team had a bit more talent because they had Glenn Rice, who, although he didn't fit great with those Lakers, he still was a pretty good piece and a pretty good third option, which they never had after he left after that season. So I picked the 2000 iteration. Next, I have the 2008 Celtics, who won 66 games, the core being Pierce, Garnett, Ray Allen, and Rondo, with a set of really good supporting casts like James Posey, Big Baby Davis, Kendrick Perkins. an older Sam Cassell, a younger Tony Allen. So a really good mix of players that they had coming off the bench, and obviously starting too. Next, with 66 wins, I have the 2012 to 13 Miami Heat. This, of course, is with a core of LeBron, Wade, Bosh, and then you had good supporting pieces like Shane Battier, Mario Chalmers, and Ray Allen. Again, another really good team that won the championship, and they won 66 games, so that's really why they're ranked where they are in these standings here. The next team I have is the 1986 to 87 Lakers, who won 65 games. They were the Showtime Lakers at their best. A core of Magic Johnson, Kareem, James Worthy, Byron Scott. AC Green was the last starter, and then you had Michael Cooper coming off the bench. Or I think actually they started Michael Cooper some of the time. Some of the time he came off the bench. Defensive Player of the Year as a shooting guard, which is pretty rare. And so yeah, they had a really complete team, and they won 65 games and won the championship. So that slots them in here at number 7. Number 8, I have the 2009 to 10 Lakers. They won 65 games, won the championship, and had a core of Kobe, Pau Gasol, Bynum, Lamar Odom, Ron Artest, and Derek Fisher. And I debated between the actually this team. Well, it's a 2008 to 9 team, and it's an iteration with Trevor Ariza, because that team is the one that won 65 games. The next year they only won 58, so scratch that. It's the 2008 to 9 team, not the 2009 to 10 team. So just X out Ron Artest and sub in Trevor Ariza where I said his name. They won 65 games, won the championship over the Magic, and had a pretty easy road to that championship in the finals. The Magic didn't put up a huge fight, so although it was a pretty close series, the Lakers just kind of had their hand on the wheel the whole time, even though some of the games were pretty close. Next, I have the 1982 to 83 76ers, who also won 65 games. And if you're wondering, like, how did I distinguish which team should be higher if they have an even record, it was just random, and I just put one above the other. So the 83 76ers had a core of Julius Erving, Dr. J, and also Moses Malone was their best player at this time. And then I believe they also had Mo Cheeks as the point guard, and I can't remember who was the shooting guard, but they had a pretty good team at this point. Won the championship over the Lakers, 65 wins. They slot in here at 9. At 10, I have the Detroit Pistons of 1988 to 89, who won 63 games in the regular season, won the championship, and had a core of Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Mark Aguirre, Dennis Rodman, and Bill Laimbeer. Also, Rick Mahorn and Vinnie Johnson were some key role players on this team. Really good, tough team, and I think they'll be really interesting to see how they match up in this playoff circuit when they play so distinctive to their era, and that could be either an advantage or a disadvantage depending on who they play. Next, I have the Spurs of 2003. I really struggled with which iteration of the Spurs to pick, but I think that this is maybe the best one that won a championship. You had a core of Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, Robinson, Steven Jackson, an older Steve Smith on the team, an older Steve Kerr. David Robinson, of course, was older too at the time, but you had just a really, really good roster in my opinion. They won 60 games. Tim Duncan was MVP that season, and then they ultimately won the championship, so they slot in here at 11. Next, I have a weird one, which is the 63 Celtics. You might say, like, well, why don't you pick one of the later iterations that won more games? But I actually picked this version because it's the last season where they had Bob Cousy in his prime, along with Bill Russell and John Havlicek. So I think like the team later on won a lot more games, but this team I think won 58, or let's see here, no, they won, yeah, they were on track for 58, and that's what they won. But I just picked them because I like that they still had Bob Cousy in his prime, whereas later on they didn't, and I think they missed him a little bit. Even though they're still winning championships, I think that this team with him was a little bit better. Next, I have actually this year's Warriors, the 2018 and 19 Warriors. I think that overall they have more talent than they've ever had in any other year, with adding DeMarcus Cousins over JaVale McGee, Currently, they're on pace for a 58 win season, so that puts them a bit lower because they've suffered a few more losses than they would normally. But I just thought that because I see them as the most talented team, this is the iteration of the team that I should put on the list. So now at number 14, our last champion to make the list, I picked kind of a weird one, but I picked the 94 to 95 Rockets, who had a win total of 47, and they won the title. And then as their core, they had Hakeem, uh, Clyde Drexler, Kenny Smith, Vernon Maxwell, Sam Cassell. That's basically the core. Oh, Robert Ory as well. Um, if you're wondering why I put a 47 win team on here, they did in fact win the championship, and they're the only team in history to beat in the first round a 3 seed, second round a 2 seed, conference finals a 1 seed, and then in the finals a 1 seed. That's definitely the hardest road to a finals I've ever seen. Playing a 3 seed, 2 seed, 1 seed, and then a 1 seed. So that is super impressive. I think a lot of people agree too. They faced a lot of injuries that season, and if they hadn't, they would have maybe been more like the 3 seed in their conference. So that's just a hypothetical, but they were definitely a lot better than the record showed. I feel like they're a lot like this year's Warriors or last year's Warriors, where they don't they don't win a ton of games. Like last year, the Warriors only won 58. This year, they're only on pace for 58, but they're really at the talent level when it hits the playoffs of a much better team. Much like those Lakers I talked about in 2001, who only won like 56 games, but then they swept nearly all of the playoffs and only lost one game. I feel like the Houston wasn't that good, but they definitely were a lot better than the regular season record showed. As for the final two teams on here who didn't win championships, who I kind of just picked for fun, just to change it up, not that because I think there can be some great teams out there who are better than certain champions, but just because they face better competition in their years, they didn't win. Those are the 2018 Rockets, last year's Rockets, who won 65 games and were, if Chris Paul hadn't gone down with an injury, I think most people came to the consensus that they would have won the championship. And then also in 2002, I picked the Kings, who won 61 games to lead the NBA, and they made it to the Western Conference Finals versus the Lakers. And most people agree that they should have won, if not for some really, really, really sketchy reffing. So I picked them as the final seed here. So to get into its basic 16 team bracket, I'm just going to go 1 versus 16, who moves on to the next round. Do that for the whole first round, second round, third round, onward until we get to the final two. I'll pick one, and then we'll see who's the final champion. So 96 Bulls versus 02 Kings. I think that it's a really interesting matchup because you have strengths of each team being vastly different. The Bulls, obviously, their strength is more like wing guys and Pippen and Jordan, and the Kings is more low post guys like Weber and Divac. But I think that the matchup to watch the most, that'd be the most interesting, would be firstly Rodman versus Weber, and secondly Pippen versus Stojakovic. So that would be really cool to see. Um, Ultimately, though, I gotta pick the Bulls. I think that they would definitely win. I think Jordan's a little overwhelming for Doug Christie probably, and Pippen is probably better than Stojakovic at this point. And if Rodman can at all somewhat contain um, Weber, then the Kings' main option is going to become Mike Bibby or Vlade Divac, which isn't awesome when you're playing the greatest regular season team of all time up until that point in '96. So I picked the Bulls to move on. Next, we got the '72 Lakers and the 2018 Warriors. This is probably our first big culture clash because it's about a 40-year difference in how these teams are playing. Um, let's see here. It's precisely a 46-year difference. So this is a really hard one to pick actually because I don't know how the '72 Lakers game would translate to playing these Warriors and like a concept of like are we playing back then or are we playing in the present because those Lakers in '72 didn't even have a 3-point line, so these Rockets wouldn't really be that good per se. I think the fairest way to do it would be say, okay, 46 years in between them. Let's split the difference and say it's 23 years apart. So let's say these teams played in 1995. Who do I think would win? I actually lean towards the Rockets a bit. I think if there's a 3-point line that's existing, they will take advantage of it. And I think that being said, they're so ahead in efficiency. And remember, this isn't this year's Rockets. It's last year's Rockets that won 65 games with a completely healthy Chris Paul and James Harden. So I'm picking the Rockets actually to win this game. And yes, I am a big fan of the Rockets, but I'm trying not to let that be bias here or play into any bias. Next, I have the 86 Celtics versus the 95 Rockets. So a little bit of a culture clash in that they're 9 years apart. Not too big of a deal though. I picked the 86 Celtics. I think that those Rockets were really good, but the Celtics just have so much more depth. You look like up and down the line. Parrish can do an okay job of handling Hakeem. Actually, it's interesting. The team that the Celtics played this year when they got to the finals in '86 was the Rockets with Hakeem. Kind of a fun fact if you didn't know. And it took the Rockets 8 years to get back to the finals, but when they got back in '94, and then this is the '95 iteration though. So I think ultimately the Rockets are good, but they just don't have enough depth to keep up with the Celtics. So I'm picking the Celtics here. The 2000 Lakers versus the current Warriors. This is super hard. Um, so going up and down the line, um, you have an older Ron Harper matching up with Steph Curry. You have Kobe Bryant and Klay Thompson matching up. You have Glenn Rice, who was still an all-star caliber player at the time, matching up with Kevin Durant. You've got AC Green matching up with Draymond Green, and then you've got Shaq and DeMarcus Cousins, which actually would probably be the most interesting matchup. But I think I gotta pick the Warriors here. I think if you just go up and down that line, like Steph Curry's gonna torch Ron Harper, an older Ron Harper at this point. Klay Thompson is going to not be as good as Kobe, but can do an okay job of neutralizing him. Kevin Durant's going to really outplay um, Glenn Rice, in my opinion. Shaq's going to definitely outplay DeMarcus Cousins at this point with DeMarcus Cousins' level of health and physicality. But Draymond Green, I think, would have an edge over AC Green at this point just because AC was so old. So I'm going to pick the Warriors tentatively, but I think it could kind of go either way. So I think, as I said with the other ones, the best way to do this generational gap is to say that they play in like the years in between. So for these two teams, that would be playing in like 2009. And if we're playing in 2009, I definitely think that the 2018-19 Warriors would have the edge, which is how the game was played at that point. I know it's a weird way to equate how to split the difference, but I think it's not fair to say that we'd be playing with 1999 rules, and I don't think it's fair to say that we'd be playing with 2018 rules. So I think this is the best way to be fair and split it, would be say they're playing in 2009 because that's in the middle. Okay, so next we have the 2008 Celtics versus the uh, let's see here, 1963 Celtics. I pick so like again to split the difference, we're gonna say that they've been playing in 1985, which is coincidentally when the other Celtics team on this list was playing. But if we're playing in that year, 1965, I actually think I'm going to take the 19 or if we're playing in 1985, I'm going to take the 63 Celtics because I think at that point, with how the physicality was in the NBA, those older Celtics with Bill Russell and all them would have the upper hand. Like Garnett and Bill Russell will probably be a pretty great matchup at this point. I think Tom Sanders and Kendrick Perkins are probably the other matchup then, so pretty bland one. Paul Pierce and Havlicek is a great matchup. Ray Allen and Sam Jones, again, a very interesting matchup. And Rondo and Cousy, again, a very interesting matchup. For those of you that don't know much about Bob Cousy, he's basically Chris Paul in the 1960s. So super good. They do have a 3-point line at this point. If we're splitting the difference of those teams playing in 1985, there would be a 3-point line to the advantage of the '08 Celtics. But I think the 80 or the 63 Celtics still have an advantage. They have depth just like the '08 Celtics do, but I think their depth is actually better. They have Casey Jones as a backup who eventually took over as a starting point guard and was super good. So I'm taking those 63 Celtics actually. Okay, let's see here. Next team I have 2013 Miami Heat versus '03 Spurs. So let's say they play in 2008. I'm going to take the 2013 Heat. Not because I don't believe in that Spurs team. It's funny that the Heat and the Spurs are always a matchup when LeBron when LeBron is on the Heat, but whatever. Um, I think that Spurs team actually seems a lot better in retrospect than it was. Like David Robinson that year, I think averaged like 10 points a game. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker each only averaged like 10 and 12 points respectively. I think Steven Jackson averaged like 15, so he was actually like their second leading scorer on the team. And I think from that perspective, they're actually a little bit of a weaker team than I would have thought initially. And of course, Steve Kerr and Steve Smith really weren't all that good at this point, so it was like Tim Duncan and a lot of role players, in my opinion, like good role players, but they're actually kind of a lot like those 95 are. They're a lot like the 94 Rockets. 95 they had Clyde Drexler, so they had a second man, but the 94 Rockets didn't really have a second guy behind Hakeem. So I think they're a lot like that, and not that that's bad. They just don't have as much firepower as the Miami Heat did at this point. Okay, so now the 7 and 10 matchup would be the 87 Lakers versus the 89 Pistons. So this is really interesting in that these teams actually faced off in the 88 and 89 finals. So, um, but this is the year before that would be when the Lakers were at their best, the Showtime Lakers. This one is honestly too hard to pick in that like the 88 Lakers, which was the next season from the team I picked, they were basically the same exact team and they beat the Pistons. But then the Pistons the next year faced that same Lakers team and beat them. So honestly, it was like a 1-1 draw when these teams faced off. But I think just the Lakers at that apex would just be slightly better than who the Pistons were. When the Lakers were more healthy and a year or two younger, they were beating the Pistons. Whereas when the Pistons beat the Lakers had gotten older and the Pistons were more like coming into their prime. So like the Lakers won against the Pistons when the Pistons were a little too young, and the Pistons beat the Lakers when the Lakers were a little too old. So it's hard to pick, but I think at their top peak performance, I'm gonna pick for each team. I'm gonna pick the Lakers, but that's a really hard one, and honestly, it's like a draw to me. The last one is the '09 Lakers versus the '83 76ers. So to be fair, we have to play this game. Let's see here. There's 26 years in between, so this game would be played in 1996. I think actually that the Lakers would have the advantage, even though the 76ers have Moses Malone. I think that Bynum and Gasol are a pretty good twin towers to try and defend him. I think that Kobe at this point was better than Dr. J because Dr. J was, I think, 2 years out from retiring and pretty well past his prime. This wasn't Afro Dr. J. This was like short hair Dr. J who wasn't doing high flying dunks anymore. He was still a good player and a good dunker and an all star, but um, I'm trying to think of how I would equate it. Like it's really hard to explain, but he was past his athletic prime. It'd be like compare what LeBron is playing like right now to what he was playing like in 2012. Like clearly in 2012 he was the better player. Um, so Dr. J was still good. He's like a 24 points per game kind of guy, but just not as good. Okay, so that concludes the first round. Um, so to go into the second round here, we have 96 Bulls versus 2009 Lakers. So to split the difference, we're going to say they play. That's a 13-year difference. So we're going to say they play in 2003. Um, I think the Bulls win. You know, you got Jordan. He's better than Kobe. Ron Harper is better than Derek Fisher. Pippen is better than Ariza. And so you got 3 out of the 5 there, and then Gasol and Dennis Rodman at this point. I'd say Gasol's like a little bit better, but Rodman's pretty comparable. And then Bynum is better than Luke Longley, but if Bynum is your major advantage in the series, I think that you probably don't win it. Um, so yeah, I'm picking the Bulls. I don't know. I just feel like Jordan and Pippen are too much for that Lakers team, and they can switch either of them on to Kobe whenever they want. And if Kobe isn't really hitting, and the whole offense is going through Gasol, who's being guarded by Dennis Rodman, the team could struggle. And if those two guys aren't doing it, then you're looking at like Andrew Bynum as your main guy on offense, who I think can be slightly unreliable at times. So I'm picking the 96 Bulls. I feel like no further explanation needed. Okay, So now we have the 87 Lakers versus the 2018 Rockets. So this game, let's see here, marks a 31-year difference in how they play. So let's say 15 years apart. Let's say these teams are playing in 2002. Man, this is hard. Going up and down the line, Magic Johnson versus Chris Paul. I think Magic Johnson has the advantage. Michael Cooper is going to do really good at guarding James Harden. James Worthy is much better than whoever Trevor Ariza would be at small forward, or if they want to play PJ Tucker at small forward, you know. Power forward, AC Green is going to dominate PJ Tucker or Ryan Anderson. He's just too physical and too good. And then Kareem versus Clint Capella would actually be a very interesting matchup because I think it'd be interesting just to see how Kareem would do against these kind of like modern centers. But I think Kareem still has the advantage at that point. They're probably actually pretty comparable talent level with where Kareem was in his career, though, like 18 years in. But I'm going to take the Showtime Lakers here. Yeah, Showtime Lakers. Okay, 86 Celtics versus 2013 Heat. This is very hard. There is a 27-year difference, so we'll say that they play 13 years apart. So they're playing in 1999 in this case. I'm going to take the 86 Celtics. I think that they would be more conducive to playing in that 1999 style of play. I think the Heat would get bullied a bit with like Robert Parrish guarding Chris Bosh and LeBron being guarded by Larry Bird, or McHale would be kind of difficult. I just don't think the Heat really like. I think Bird and LeBron at this point would sort of be like basically a wash. Like they kind of cancel each other out. And then I think if you look at the supporting cast of the Celtics and the supporting cast of the Heat, at this point, honestly, McHale and Wade pretty much cancel each other out, and Parrish and Bosh actually pretty well cancel each other out too. So I really say you look at those supporting casts, I like the Celtics a lot more. So I'm taking the 86 Celtics. Okay, so now we have the 2000. Let's see here. We have the 2019 Warriors versus the 2000 or no 2000. Let's see here. We have the 2019 Warriors versus the 1963 Celtics, which is definitely the biggest clash of age ranges. Let's see here. So the difference between those teams of 56 years. So we're going to say they play 28 years between. So that would be 1991 is when each of these teams are playing. I'm going to pick the Warriors in this game just because I feel like the three-point line exists. They have the physicality in DeMarcus Cousins. They're not going to get beat up in this 1991 style play. Bill Russell, although he's super good and like a top 3-4 player of all time, you got to remember he's 6'8" or 6'9". I don't know how well he's going to do guarding the fringe 7-footer DeMarcus Cousins, who has 40 pounds on him. Steph Curry and Bob Cousy is actually going to be pretty much a wash, but Klay Thompson and Sam Jones pretty washy. But I think Durant has a pretty sizable advantage over Havlicek. Hondo is 6'5", Durant is 7 feet, so he's going to have a pretty big height advantage and matchup advantage there. So I'm going to take the Warriors there. So let's see who our final four is. We've got the Bulls facing the Warriors, and then we've got the 2018 Rockets facing the 86 Celtics. So again, Rockets and Celtics, like the 86 finals. But okay, so Bulls and Warriors first. So again, there's a 23-year difference, so we're going to play 11 years apart. So let's say these teams are playing in 2007. Man, that's hard. Steph versus Ron Harper, Klay versus Jordan, Pippen versus Durant, Draymond versus Rodman, DeMarcus Cousins versus Longley. I think it's pretty accurate to say that like Pippen and Jordan is a wash with Curry and Durant, and so then you're left with like Ron Harper and Klay Thompson, and Klay Thompson's obviously better, and then you're left with Draymond Green and Dennis Rodman, who I think Dennis Rodman is slightly better, but they're pretty comparable. Um, and then you look at this season actually Draymond's playing pretty bad, so Dennis Rodman would definitely have the advantage. And then you look at DeMarcus Cousins and Luke Longley, and DeMarcus Cousins obviously has the advantage. Tony Kukoc off the bench helps, and you could say like maybe they sub him in for Longley, but I'd say that you still got an advantage with Cousins. But with Longley or with Cousins this season and what Longley was, they're actually pretty similar in their level of value and production. So that's you could argue that's a wash, but I think Klay Thompson versus Ron Harper, you definitely have an advantage there. So I'm gonna say it. I'm sorry. I'm picking the 2019 Warriors over the Bulls of 1996. Last matchup, 86 Celtics versus 2018 Warriors. The split the difference. Let's see here. It's 32 years, so we're going to play 16 years apart. So in 2002, oh, it's hard. Oh man, I think like my gut tells me that in that era, the style of play that was being done would favor the Rockets, but then I think 2002 was right before they changed all the rules, so it was still like 90s style of basketball, really. So I'm going to pick the 86 Celtics. I think Larry Bird and James Harden, let's say, are sort of a wash in this series in that they kind of cancel each other out. And then Chris Paul's probably better than Kevin McHale as each team's second best player, but like Dennis Johnson is still a really good player to be matching with Chris Paul. Um, I like McHale better than I like Ariza or PJ Tucker or Eric Gordon for that matter. I like the depth of the Celtics a lot more, so I'm going with the Celtics. So lastly, 86 Celtics versus 2019 Warriors. Um, oh God. Again, we're gonna have to split the difference and say these teams are playing in 2002. So with the 2002 again with the same type of rules, it's hard. I think Durant and Larry Bird cancel each other out, and so then you're left with like DeMarcus Cousins versus Robert Parrish. Robert Parrish has the advantage there. McHale versus Draymond Green. McHale has the advantage, but then like Steph and Klay both have the advantage over Dennis Rodman, or excuse me, Dennis Johnson and Danny Ainge. So like the starting lineups are a wash. Let's go to the bench. Andre Iguodala versus as their best bench player versus maybe Bill Walton or Scott Wedman. Oh God. Honestly, this series is a toss up, but I'm gonna roll with my gut. And I'm gonna say with the 0-2 rules and how it was still played like 90s basketball, I'm gonna favor the 86 Celtics. All right. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was a really long one. I know. I'm sorry if you disagree, but the team I came out with as the best of all time was the 86 Celtics, who have before been dubbed as maybe the greatest team of all time. They won 67 games in the regular season. They won the NBA championship. There you go. What else can be said? Hope you guys have a good day. Leave comments if you have anything of input to say and let me know. I'd be happy to hear from you. And have a good day. Bye.